All right, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Okay, so we are going to continue. Last week we were looking at Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th chapter, and we were in the 106th verse. And I decided to make this kind of like a two-part deal just because this verse is there's a lot to unpack. As we mentioned, Ibn Juzay said that actually this verse is one of the most complicated verses in the Qur'an to study in terms of grammar, the context, all those things. So we're going to unpack all of this again. And so I thought this week, as we inshallah finish the last section of what he talks about, but also just to kind of summarize a little bit, like what are some major takeaways from the verse? What are some major takeaways that are important here? So if we go back to the verse, Allah Ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu شاهدت بينكم إذ حضر أحدكم الموت حين الوصية إذن ذوى عدل منكم. So, all you who believe, when you feel death encroaching upon you, call two just people, two just men from amongst you to take testimony or to bear witness as you make your bequest, what we refer to in Arabic as the wasiyah. أو آخران من غيركم إن كنتم ضربتم في الأرض. Otherwise, if you have to, then two non-Muslims if you are afflicted with death while you're on a journey, right? فأصبحتم مصيبة الموت. So, as we said, this verse, one of the important things or one of the areas of dispute between the ulama is the permissibility or lack thereof of can you allow a non-Muslim to bear witness to your testimony, to your bequest? Can you or not? And we said there was some, roughly to summarize, there was some disagreement. The majority of scholars said no, where Ibn Abbas radiallahu an, was the dissenting opinion that said yes, but with the shart or the condition that you were traveling, meaning that if you're not traveling, then the requirement is yes, you need to have two just Muslim men. And we had said, this was important and relevant to us because sometimes we forget that during that time, the Muslims were not a majority, right? Muslims were not a majority in that time. And so they would have been living amongst a fairly sizable non-Muslim population. And so in somewhat similar to our condition today, that we might be predominantly surrounded by and live amongst non-Muslims, and therefore we would have the same level of obligation to find two just Muslim men to bear witness. But if we were traveling, then of course we could take the opinion of Ibn Abbas that was acceptable to take from. So that was just to kind of help summarize where we had left off. Now, continuing with some of the commentary by Ibn Juzay, he says, وَقَدْ استحلفهما علي ibn Abi Talib. So now we're going to look at some of the opinions of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anhuma. They made them swear an oath, right? The two men, right? Now, what is this that's so important? We said the other part that I wanted to cover today, like what are some of the major takeaways? So one, we said so much of Islam is in itself shahada. So much of Islam in and of itself is bearing witness or bearing testimony. And that, in fact, our faith is built on shahada. Right? Shahada an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammad Rasulullah. It is built on testimony. And that's why, not to beleaguer a point or become too tangential, but this happens quite frequently where you have an individual who is not a Muslim, but is very popular. Perhaps they're an actor or some other kind of celebrity and are beloved to people for one reason or another. And that person passes away. And I just saw this the other day, somebody writing about this. And people will want to say things like rest in peace and basically make dua for them. And the argument behind this is like, well, you don't know what they died on. It's true. Obviously, Allahu huwa rabbul qulub faqat. Like Allah Ta'ala is indeed, He is the Lord of the hearts, wa arifuha. He is the one that knows them. But that is not the condition or the requirement, is that I have to know the internal secrets of a person's heart. What I judge a person according to is what they gave witness to. What was their shahada to? How did they live? Jaharatan, zahiran, out loud, in public. That is how a person is judged. And so being open and bearing witness is an extremely important component to Islam, not only as it relates to mirath and wasiyah, to inheritance laws and bequesting somebody something, right? But just in Islam in general. And so if a person did not make their shahada, that they were not known to be a Muslim, then they are treated in that way. They're treated with what they were known to have been. And as I say to people, if a person died on Islam, but it was unknown, will Allah Ta'ala deny them Jannah? If just whatever. Although we also know that Allah Ta'ala will accept, right, the repentance of a person up until the death throes. I mean, there's all kinds of things that make this much more complicated than just some simple Simon. Well, you don't know, with the unspoken inference or assumption that everybody dies on Islam, right? Just some of us say it before, but on a person's way out, everybody dies on Islam. This is an assumption that has no basis. And so in Islam, we treat people and we give them their rights according to what they bore witness to. Now, obviously, even if a person is a kafir and they proclaim to be a kafir, there are still some rights due to that person. A person is not stripped of all rights simply because they are a kafir. That being said, there are privileges that are bestowed upon a person for being Muslim openly, giving shahada. That's why if a person is known to have been a Muslim, maybe they were not mutadayyin or musalli, they were not super religious, maybe they were not a person of regular prayer, but they were known to have been a Muslim, and they pass away, we give them janazah. Right? We will give them a janazah. Now there's there's also some difference of opinion about, do we pray over a person that was known to be a fasiq, and on and on. That's a separate, separate conversation. But this verse is showing the importance and the primacy of saying something openly. The other part, and this is why Islam, you will not find any contradictions in the Book of Allah. Allah Ta'ala rewards people for their shahada. Right? Allah Ta'ala rewards people for openly proclaiming their Islam. The greatest reward is that for a person that openly proclaims their Islam, they take their shahada. What? They have all of their past deeds, are wiped away. Their slate is clean. That does not happen for a person that doesn't do so. So the verse is showing the importance of and the primacy of Shahada. The other one is it also shows the importance of the virtues of honesty, right? As-sidq, right? Wal-adala, and of having integrity. So Allah Ta'ala says what? That He want to call to you what? What? إِذْنَانِ أَذَوَا عَدَلْ مِنْكُمْ. Two just men from amongst you. Two just men. And Allah Ta'ala is, who's Allah addressing? So the other proof, how do we know that the strongest opinion leads towards the two people of justice to bear witness should be a Muslim? How does the verse begin? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe. And Allah Ta'ala does not refer to the people of kufr, whether that be shirk or even the other people of Ahl al-Kitab. Allah will refer to them as that, but they're not. Ya ayyuhal muslimun, O Muslims. So because it begins with that, right, it showcases and is a stronger proof. That's why the vast majority of scholars said no, it should be a Muslim. So the verse also highlights the importance of integrity. And there's a dual part here, 2 points I want to highlight. One, obviously, it's highlighting honesty and integrity as important qualities to have within yourself, but it also says that these should be qualities that you look for in others. Meaning, you just don't trust anybody. You should be discerning, like a Muslim should be discerning, and when it comes to affairs like this, you want to find those that have the best qualities. So it isn't just anybody. And that's why also, like when you read in the books of fiqh, when it comes to the bab of zawaj, right, and nikah, when it comes to marriage, and they will talk about what the two witnesses that have to witness a marriage, that not only should they in the same way, right, be mukallaf, mubaligh, they should be of the, an adult age or age of responsibility, but they should be known to be people that are trustworthy so that they can bear witness that indeed these two people are getting married. So the ayah is highlighting the importance of what sidq and adala, of honesty and having trustworthiness and so on. It also shows the importance of the taking of oaths. That's why it says, وَقَدْ إِسْتَحْلَفَهُمَا Ali ibn Abi Talib wa Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, that Ali and Abu Musa, they wanted these people to swear a witness, which, to swear an oath, which is what Allah Ta'ala talks about here in the verse, right? So oaths, when you take an oath, that's why Allah Ta'ala says that He will hold you in account for the major oaths that you swear, but He will be more lenient for, the lighter ones. And so one should be careful about swearing oaths because they are a type of ibadah, they're kind of like a type of worship. It also, because how did this play out? As we mentioned last time, that the man that there were two Sahabi that were going to go to Asham. Wa alaikum salam. One man accompanied them, and this is the man who became ill while traveling and then eventually passed away, and he made a wasiyah, he made his bequest and had those two Sahabi, those two men that went with him, as the witnesses to give testimony, and designated who his heirs and what they would get. And when they went back, they noticed a discrepancy initially. His wasiyah said he had this item. I think it was like a jar or a vessel, right? And they didn't initially find it. And the Prophet ﷺ made them swear an oath that he really said that he had this. And they said, yeah, he said that he had it. And then after some time, they discovered the item and, alhamdulillah, it became true. So the other importance about this showcases in regular everyday affairs of the believer how the Qur'an and also the Sunnah have an important role to play in our everyday lives, and that we should be applying them to. It also highlights the importance of adala, or justice in Islam, beyond merely the penal, right? That the concept of justice in Islam is not simply punishing criminals, right, or creating criminal laws, but right, generally an overall system of justice. So in this, he said the Ali ibn Abi Talib and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anhuma, they made them swear, oh, if you doubt, meaning that if you suspect their truthfulness or trustworthiness. So again, be discerning. Don't call upon people that you like, well, I don't really know that person, or, you know, they're known to sometimes be a little bit sketchy or shady. No, you know, if you, or make them swear an oath if you feel that, so that it becomes binding, and then those can be held responsible. That's why initially those two men, when they gave testimony, hey, he said that he had this item, when they couldn't find it, the Prophet ﷺ told them to swear an oath if that was the case, right? So he says, "Ad-damir fi bihi lil-qasam," right? So the pronoun of him in the oath and was refers to the one for whom the oath is made. Meaning, we do not exchange the truthfulness of the oath by Allah for a worldly gain. So you will be held accountable for this, right? And so as we mentioned in the verse today, like from Surah Al-Jathiyah, Allah Ta'ala will say to people on the Day of Judgment, هَذَا كِتَابُنَا يَنْطِقُ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْحَقِّ إِنَّا كُنَّا نَسْتَنْسِخُ مَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. This indeed is our book that articulates exactly what you did, and we have always had a record of what you did. So it's highlighting that, again, as many of the scholars have said, that you can almost not turn any page in the Qur'an that it will either directly or indirectly have some reference to the Day of Judgment, right? This is the importance of it. And so obviously to swear a false oath or testimony would be a major sin. So he said that we don't swear falsely by Allah for the sake of money, even if the one for whom we swear is a relative. So also, you know, one of the goals of revelation, yani ghayat al-tanzil, what is the goal of revelation? On one hand, we know that it is the hunaka tahrim liqata' silat al-raham. There is a prohibition on the cutting of family ties. So Islam, on one hand, strongly affirms familial bonds. It wants to maintain the ties of kinship. That being said, that does not extend, though, to, you know, a kind of asabiya, like a kind of gang mentality, or, you know, well, that's my cousin, that's my uncle, that's my mom, that's my brother. I'm going to back them on something no matter what, because, you know, we want to keep it in the family, right? So on one hand, Islam definitely wants to strengthen the bonds of family and prohibits the severing of bonds. On the other hand, it also warns and cautions against making choices not based upon will Allah reward or punish, will this be on the right side or left side of my scale, but, you know, let's just keep it in the family, right? Doing things that would be that kind of despicable behavior. And the reason why this is mentioned, he said, is that this is because, for instance, most people will favor their family, right? Most people favor their family and are maybe even more inclined to do something wrong for a relative than they would for a friend or obviously a stranger, right? And so we said, and we do not conceal the testimony of Allah. You know, وَلَا نَكْتُبُ شَهَادَةَ اللَّهِ أي شَهَادَةُ التي أمر الله بحفظها وأدائها, means that what testimony that Allah has commanded to be preserved and given. So again, highlighting Islam, I mean, I know that there's a certain kind of discourse amongst certain knowledge traditions in Islam that highlight secrecy of some things, and certainly like statements where the Prophet ﷺ said that it's better in one way giving is better than receiving, but if you can do in a way that is not braggy, obviously you don't want to brag or make riya. You don't want to do in a way that shows off, that robs you of the benefit. And so in certain contexts that is true, especially Allah Ta'ala talks about certain types of ibadah, like getting up at night when, and these are the type of prayers that are done when nobody's around, when you're by yourself in your home and other people don't know about it. So that aspect of the secret, part of Muslim life, yes, it's true. But then there's another aspect where no, things also need to be out in the open. So there's a balance, right? There's a certain type of balance that is keying us in here. And he says, وَالْأَوْلِيَانِ عَلَى هَذَا هُمَا الشَّاهِدَانِ اللَّذَانِ ظَهَرَتْ خِيَانَتَهُمَا. He said, and the two most entitled in this context are the two witnesses whose betrayal has been exposed. What is it talking about? People that gave false testimony, right? He says, meaning that what al-awliyani bit-tahlifi wa ta'anif, right? Those, meaning those that are most entitled to be made to swear and to be reprimanded and shamed. So also call people, this is what I said about the discerning part. When you're going to have people swear an oath or give testimony to a thing, one of the reasons why you want to have people that are, solid people, well-known people, trustworthy people, part of it also means that these are people that can be held to account. So that, even a good person, though they're not perfect, maybe they did something, they had a moment of weakness where they committed a sin. But if they are overall a good person, even if they did a mistake, because it could be an honest mistake, or even if they, had a moment of having a momentary lapse of iman being weak, if they're overall a good person, then they will also have the means to be held accountable. So let this be part of your discernment. Don't just trust anybody. A lot of times I see people get married. I'm making kind of a similarity because, again, in marriage, we call people to bear witness. A lot of times when it comes to marriage, I see people like, oh, we want to do the nikah today. And just call up any so-and-so. I mean, sometimes even to the point where the wali, right, the guardian of the woman, will just be any old person. And when I'm often summoned to these kinds of unions, these kind of marriages, I will push back on the family and I don't know if I feel comfortable officiating this wedding. And they're like, well, why? And I said, well, because, for instance, we live in a non-Muslim land. And so what Ibn Juzay is highlighting here is the ability to hold others accountable. So we live in a non-Muslim land. You're going to do an Islamic marriage, and many of these they also don't have the civic marriage component that goes along with it, meaning that it'll be very difficult for the woman to have any means of recourse. So she's already, if you're going to do only, and I'm not saying that you have to, and I have done weddings where there has been no, civic government marriage. What I'm saying is, if you are not going to do that, whether we like it or not, that does take the ability of the woman to have any redress for wrong that is done to her, because the union exists outside any kind of court system, because we don't have an Islamic court system here. So then at the very least, you want to make sure the wali and the witnesses, right, the woman's guardian and the witness to the marriage are people that are not only good and sound in character, but people who are present that can, ideally be held to account to support, did this wedding really happen? Or in the case of the wali, if she suffers some abuse or is robbed of her rights, that she has some means to redress. She's going to have some means to have her rights, adjudicated on her behalf. When you just pick random cats, right? I mean, they might be mutadayyin, they might be salih, but if you don't really know that person, you don't know their phone number, you don't know how to call them up, there's no relationship between the aris and the arus. There's no relationship between the man and the woman getting married, the wali, so that if her wali is strange to her, and something happens in the marriage, let's say the husband doesn't fulfill the mahar, right, what he was going to pay in the dowry, and she wants to have her right. Well, if the wali she has no relationship with, how does she get her rights? So these are the things that we have to, consider, that we can also draw analogy from generally what these verses here are trying to teach us, inshallah. And so another reading of the first one, so he's talking about the verse where those who are called. He said, so وَقُرِيَ الْأَوْلِيِّينَ. He said, جَمَعَ الْأَوَّلِ. So now he's just going into some of the language. What does it mean that it's simply the plural of those, right? And it's in a certain kind of grammatical context that it serves as a description of what those who have a claim against them, or implying that they were the object, right, of the verb. And there's just some grammatical things that he highlights. Again, this is unusual because in Ibn Juzay's tafsir, it's usually pretty economical in terms of what he has to say. He usually does not go into a lot of excessive detail because, one, the title of his tafsir is at-tasheel, right? Is to make something simple to grasp. The fact that he spends a lot of time on this one verse highlights the importance of what this verse is saying, not only in the context of a person's wasiyah, but also just some general rules that are also important to us. So again, let them both swear an oath by Allah. Our testimony is more truthful than their testimony. Just going into the importance of swearing oaths. Then he says in the phrase, then let them swear an oath by Allah, right, means that these two latter witnesses swear that their testimony is more truthful than the testimony of the two original witnesses that may have had some betrayal, right? So also it shows. And another important aspect, what is Allah talking about here, and what is Ibn Juzay highlighting? Islah. So let's say a person makes a bequest, they pass away, there's some issue of discrepancy of what they have designated for their heirs to have, then you call in two other witnesses for them to come and give this testimony. What? As a means of rectifying the situation. So another important thing that we can extrapolate from this particular verse is it highlights Islam likes for things to be made whole. It doesn't like to leave things hanging. It likes for people to get their rights, because when we're talking about a wasiyah, what are we really talking about? Well, who are the people that are going to be the recipients of that wasiyah? Right? They're basically, that's their property, their wealth, or whatever that it is. And they would be robbed of their rights. So we don't want people to be robbed of their rights. So Islam wants everybody to get what is due to them, right? So this also just is highlight. Don't touch that though, please, because I don't want to turn that off. It highlights the importance of rectifying matters. And so this is an important lesson, again, that we can now extrapolate out to many other areas of our life, which is to, make things right, make good out of a bad situation, right? A person dies, they've left something, there's some discrepancy. It also shows the community needs to get involved. I think a lot of times in the modern day context, we live our lives so individually as Muslims that communal participation is almost like odd or strange to us. But what is Allah talking about here? Somebody has died, they've passed away, maybe there's some discrepancy. Call people to bear witness that this is really what it is. If there was some betrayal, then get some other people to come in and fix and resolve the situation. Because again, if you allow something like this to fester. Like I said, how many times, I mean, I can't even count how many times many of us will know families that have torn themselves apart because of inheritance. So-and-so allegedly had this and was supposed to get that, and, things were allowed to spin out of control to the point of what? The to the point that people cut the ties of kinship. And this is something that will dissolve communities and cause fitna, cause chaos in society. So the other important part is that, don't allow problems to fester. The community has been bestowed with the correct instructions, with the guidance of Islam to solve problems, right? So a great, an important part of, an important component of guidance, the guidance of the Qur'an, the Sunnah of Islam, is to what? Solve problems. Because life is sticky, life is messy, things happen. But we should be amongst those who work towards what's good, resolve problems, and make islah, right? Also, so as I said, what beyond just simply the legal aspects here, simply beyond the legality of who gets how much and on, is that these verses also touch on the broader moral and ethical teachings of the Qur'an that again can be applied to so many other parts of our lives. Emphasizing sidq, right? Being honest, emphasizing adala, emphasizing being just, but then also in many ways what is unspoken here by telling people that they should swear an oath and be called to testimony that this is what, it's ultimately talking about taqwa. It's ultimately talking about taqwa, which we know taqwa is what? It is, as Tabrizi said, it is hajiz baynaka wa bayna ma takhafu yahfaduka. That taqwa is like a barrier that you put between yourself and that which you fear can harm you, that it will protect you, that it will preserve you. What is it that we can put between ourselves and that which is the sort of ultimate form of harm or potential threat is, of course, the fire, the punishment of Allah. So what is it that we can put between ourselves and that? Taqwa. So giving truthful testimony, setting things right, not lying, being honest in our dealings with people, that is a form of taqwa that will help to protect us and put a barrier between us. So again, this verse 106 here, this is why Ibn Juzay goes into so much detail compared to the other verses which he might give 2 or 3 words to explain something here and there. And again, it's pretty terse, it's pretty short and economical. But he said this is one of the most important verses in the Qur'an. It's one of the most important verses in the Qur'an because it deals with things on the interior of, like, the condition of the heart, being honest, giving shahada. It deals with family. It deals with mirath and wasiyah. It deals with family issues. It deals with community issues, calling the community in people. It deals with also not just that if إِذَا أَحَدَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ, not of death approaches one of you, that idea, but what if somebody in the community, you might be the one called upon. Any of us could be called upon, potentially, to bear witness to a thing, which means that in order for me to be called upon to bear witness in the case of somebody's bequest of their wasiyah, well, then I have to meet those same qualifications. I have to be honest. I have to be known in the community. I have to be a known quantity. I have to be present. I have to be known to be trustworthy, right? So on one hand, yes, I don't want to show off like, oh, mashallah, look at him. He's such a pious person. Obviously, not to that, but people themselves will come to their own conclusion. Yeah, mashallah, so and so, he's a good person, she's a solid person, they can give testimony, right? So also that we want to work to acquire such that maybe we could be called upon to also be one of those two witnesses. And also that we would not have the fear to give testimony. If I'm, what is the adage that, well, if you don't have anything to hide, then you shouldn't be afraid to disclose what you have, right? But to a certain kind of degree, if we're going to be people of truthfulness, honesty, and we're going to be called upon, then if I am really a person that is sincere in all of those things, then inshallah, I should not have any fear to be called upon. I shouldn't be eager and push myself forward to be called upon, but nonetheless, I should be a person that strives to acquire, right, these kinds of qualities in my life. Now, moving on to the 107th verse. Now, as Allah Ta'ala says, and if they were found guilty of testimony, فَإِنْ عُثِرَ عَلَى أَنَّهُمَا إِسْتَحَقًّا إِثْمًا. If they, however, now those that were called upon, if it is discovered that indeed they did give some false testimony, then let the deceased two closest heirs affected by who were the recipients of this bequest or the wasiyah replace those witnesses and then have them testify under oath. So again, like we said, Islam looks to rectify, to make good out of a bad situation. So you begin with the best of intentions. Number one, as an individual, you should try to have these affairs set up. And I always tell people, again, take the time. I don't get any kickback from mywasiyah.com, but at least it's a place to start. Check it out to make sure that you have your affairs, alaikum salam, you have your affairs settled. 1. 2, do your best to call, people to come and bear witness that are good. But let's say, obviously you are not the knower of hearts. So the people that initially that were called to bear witness, those didn't pan out, that they gave false testimony, then let two people that would have been affected by this, that have an entitlement, as the Qur'an says, istahaq alayhim, right? Those that would have an entitlement, those that would be most affected by it, then فَيُقْسِمَانِ بِاللَّهِ, let them then come and give a testimony لِشَهَادَتَهُنَا, right? أَحَقَّ مِنْ شَهَادَتِهِمَا وَمَا أَعْتَدَيْنَا إِنَّا إِذًا لِمَنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Then let them come and give testimony that again we have not transgressed, otherwise we will be amongst the dhalimun. So it wants to make good out of a bad situation. I think beyond the particulars of the ayah is these generalities, is having the outlook of a Muslim. How can I make good out of a bad situation? How can I be mutafa'il? How can I be a person of being positive, right? Is it okay? I thought these people were going to be two good witnesses. They lied or they deceived us. But you know what? We want to make sure that the recipients of the wasiyah, that they get what's due to them. Istihqaq, as we talked about last time, their entitlements. And so just having the idea and the outlook, right, to encourage people to be problem solvers and to bring about good. And so it says what? ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَنْ يَأْتُوا بِالشَّهَادَةِ عَلَى وَجْهِهِمَا. In this way, it is more likely that witnesses will give true testimony على وجههما أو يخاف or يخاف, or perhaps they'll straighten up and fly right, so to speak, out of fear that their oaths will be seen as false. So it also to put the fear of God in people, right? And so, wattaqullah, right? In verse 108 towards the end, what do we say about taqwa? Allah says what? And have fear of Allah. Have taqwa of Allah. Wattaqullaha wasma'u. Right? Have fear of Allah and obey. Now what's interesting is ta'a is often thought of as obedience, right? In the word in Arabic, ta'a is thought of as obedience. But also, sama' right? To listen, right? To hear, to listen is also a form of obedience. So Allah has given us this sort of laundry list of how to deal with this situation. And at the end of it, He said it's about what? It's about taqwa. Wattaqullah wasma'u. And listen, which means that yes, those verses that came before, there's a lot of information. So you may have to go back and read through it several times again. This is why Ibn Juzay spends a lot of time on this section, going into a lot of detail. Why? There's a lot of things to unpack. And this is also an important lesson just in our study of the Qur'an in general. You know, a lot of times students will say, I didn't understand this. Okay, how many times did you read it? You know, you may read a verse once, you didn't get it, or you didn't get the gist of it altogether. Read it over and over again. Contemplate it. Then, if you don't understand it, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Then go and talk to the people of knowledge, and inshallah, they can help you unpack it and help you understand it. But first, do your own due diligence. The Quran is a book. While it is Kitab al-Mubin, it is clear, but it is also a heavy book. Sometimes there are certain topics that are complicated. Like when you go through who gets how many of what, the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and so on, right? These are not easy things to just read through once and memorize and have it clear. So Allah Ta'ala is saying what? You may have to go back, wasma'u, really listen, comprehend and obey, and that can only come if you really grasp what I said. So go through and read it again. Wallahu la yahdi al-qawm al-fasiqeen. And that's why, so at the end Allah says what? And Allah does not guide a people of fisq. Allah does not guide a rebellious or immoral people. Part of immorality can come from just being jahl, from being ignorant of a thing. So take the time and give the Quran its due diligence, so that one, you can have fear of Allah, not only on an emotional level, but also based upon fahm and fiqh, like real solid comprehension, so that you fear Him, because now you really know what you're going to be held into account for, right? So learning the Quran in fasail and real detail, this will increase the reverence, inshallah, in the heart for one's Lord, and increase the fear that we have of Him, to be obedient to Him, and to prioritize the learning and the studying of His book instead of being hasty in measures. So this takes us up to the 108th verse, inshallah. We will begin at the 109th verse, inshallah, next week. And we're going to take maybe like a quick 10-minute break or so, and then we will do our fiqh class. Were there any questions before we wrap up the tafsir session? So inshallah, we'll see you again. We'll be on verse 109, Surah Al-Ma'idah, 5th chapter, verse 109. If you want to look ahead a little bit, inshallah, we'll be there, inshallah, next week. Wa jazakum Allahu khairan. Wa salawatullahi ta'ala ala nabihi al-kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum.